Welcome in. It's an August 8th edition of PFT PM. Still trying to power through, still recovering very gradually from the severe vertigo that hit me in the middle of the night Monday going into Tuesday. I won't bore you with the details any more than I already have, but the bottom line is the less I move my head, the less I turn my head, the less I look up or look down, the better I feel. It's probably going to take a couple of weeks before everything is normal again. And then even then, I'll only be as normal as I ever am. Maybe I'll come out of this even more normal than I usually am. Either way, you don't take for granted. That's one thing I've learned through all this, how it feels to feel normal. Every once in a while, when you're just going about your day, you know, if you're having a rough day, if it's a boring day, if you've had some issues at work, whatever it may be, as long as you feel fine, just kind of soak that in because it feels pretty freaking good to feel fine. And you don't appreciate it until you don't feel fine. So all of you out there who currently feel fine, be happy about that, even if you're dealing with a bunch of other crap. And obviously we're here as the diversion for all the crap that you otherwise would be dealing with. And the preseason begins tonight, which helps with the diversion for the crap that you otherwise would be dealing with. Now, the preseason, in my view, and I say this every year, there's one primary objective. Get through it with your team as healthy as possible. That's it. That's all that matters. The practice reps are good for separating the final 7, 8, 9 roster spots. I mean, even by now, teams know who the top 40 to 45 guys are. They know. They probably had a pretty good idea of the 35 to 40 going into training camp. By now, 2 weeks of training camp practices, 40 to 45, they know. So all that's really up for grabs at this point is the last 5 or 6 roster spots. Now, beyond that, you've got the practice squad designations. So you've got guys fighting for that. But most teams have a pretty good idea at this point. The preseason games are part of the money grab. And let's call it what it is. I mean, they've got 3 games per team. And I know that it's not full price like it used to be, but they've got revenue streams that are tied to these phony games. And I still remember watching preseason games as a kid in the 70s when there were 6 of them before 14 regular season games. It was on TV and I watched it. There were 3 channels, not counting PBS or that weird channel that always had syndicated shows but never any network programming that eventually in most markets became Fox. It was your ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, and that was that. So if there was a nationally televised preseason game, it didn't matter. If it's preseason, you're still watching it. So that's still part of it. 20 total games for the NFL every year. And you see how they want to move that needle toward fewer preseason, more regular season. So bottom line, 3 preseason games, stay healthy. And don't read a whole lot into anything that anyone does because there's no real game planning. Most players are out of the game by the time they could ever get to the point in the game where they start to figure out what the defense is doing. You know, quarterback comes out and maybe struggles. Well, as the game went on, maybe he would have been better. Maybe they would have figured out what a defense is doing. Maybe if the player looks good, he would have looked a lot worse if he played the whole game. It really is a worked view of what truly happens in a football game that counts. It looks like real football. It feels like real football. It's televised like real football, but we know it's not real football. And the real objective is don't get injured. There will inevitably be something that happens that knocks a starting player out into the regular season, maybe out for the year. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we know from experience these are the things that occur. So hold your breath when your favorite team is playing. Check PFT for any injury updates to see whether or not you've had a key player on your favorite team go down, and then you pick up the pieces. And look, if you're going to lose a key player for the full season, the earlier you do it, the better, because you have a better chance to recover and fill that spot and get that person ready. But you just don't want it to happen. But we know. I'm not trying to jinx anybody. We just know that once it's time to play full contact football, injuries are inevitable. And they inevitably happen in a way that can change the course of a team's entire season. The best example, most recent example, what happened to Aaron Rodgers 4 snaps into the 2023 campaign, his first with the Jets. And we still don't know whether or not we're going to see him at all in the 2024 preseason. The coach, Robert Saleh, said it's his instinct to not play him. Aaron Rodgers said that's news to me. We'll see if we see any of Aaron Rodgers. But Jets fans everywhere will be holding their breath any moment that Aaron Rodgers is out on the field in the preseason and really beyond, into the regular season, into week 1 at San Francisco, and then week 2 they're at Tennessee, and then week 3 on that short week Thursday night home opener against the Patriots. 3 games only 10 days apart. Somebody got into an argument with me that it's really 11 days, not 10 days. Look, I wasn't planning to talk about this, but I just kind of landed there. Monday, the first night of the season. Monday. The following Thursday, if you start on Monday and you start counting from there, it is 10 days from Monday when they play on Thursday. If you count 10 days from Monday, it's Thursday. It's truly 11 separate days. But if Monday is 0, Tuesday is 1, you get to 10 by the time the Jets will have played their third game. And that's a lot. Whether it's 10 or whether it's 11, tomato. To start on a Monday, play on a Sunday, and then on a Thursday when you've got 4 snaps of regular season football since January of 2023, that's a lot. And Jets fans, I think, will be anxious that entire stretch of 3 games to open the season. So anxiety is the key word as we go through the preseason, because the main goal, again, get out of it with your team as healthy as possible. You also want to get out of your practices with your team as healthy as possible. In Seattle yesterday, it looked a little dicey. By the time it was all said and done, there were at least 5 fights during Seahawks practice, and it was one of the rare practices that owner Jody Allen actually attended. She got to see. Hope she brought some popcorn. She can afford a whole popcorn factory and then some. But hopefully she was entertained by the fighting that happened. Although there's a balance there. I was on KJR last night with Dave Mahler and Dick Fain, and we were talking about the fighting. And it's like, on one hand, a coach likes that because you want to see the fight. On the other hand, you don't want to get anybody injured, and you don't want your players to be undisciplined to get themselves into fights when it's time to play in games that count. And you get a 15-yard penalty, you get ejected from the game. It's just a big mess. But you do want to see the fire that's at the heart that leads to the fighting. Now, it went overboard for the Seahawks on Monday, and it ultimately culminated in DK Metcalf removing cornerback Trey Brown's helmet, swinging it at him, missing his bare head, and hitting safety Kayvon Wallace in the guardian cap with the helmet. And Wallace, by all appearances, was fine, but we've seen some violent helmet swinging. Think back to Aaron Donald a couple years ago when he blew a gasket against the Bengals in joint practices. When he made contact with a Bengals helmet on top of another helmet, you could see at one point that helmet flattened from the force that Aaron Donald was using. So these things can be very dangerous. And now that we see the NFL willing to discipline teams who are involved in fights during joint practices, I'm a firm believer the NFL needs to exercise jurisdiction over these fights when it's just one team. Because when it's left to the teams, and the NFL's confirmed it is left to the teams, are you really going to take serious action against your best players? Are your most important players exempt from whatever boys will be boys mindset would apply if they get into a fight? You're not going to suspend your best player. Aaron Donald, after he did what he did a couple of years ago, he got a talking to. You're not going to sit him down. You're not going to apply the punishment to him for doing in the preseason the punishment that the NFL would apply if he did it in the regular season. Think about Myles Garrett with Mason Rudolph, however many years ago that was now. It was a multiple game suspension, 5 or 6, if I recall correctly, and there's a chance I don't. Aaron Donald had no punishment that we know of. And the Rams, we keep that all in-house. That's a polite way of saying it's none of your damn business. I think it should be the NFL's business because eventually somebody's going to be hurt. And I think the union needs to be demanding that the NFL exercise better oversight of these practices, because at some point you have to protect the players from each other. They start getting sick of seeing each other, dealing with each other, hitting each other, and it boils over. And yesterday it boiled over in a big, big way for the Seahawks with at least 5 fights. But there will be no punishment from the NFL. And those fights happen the same day the NFL whacked the Lions and the Giants $200,000 each for their multiple fights over 2 days of joint practices. All right. In Buffalo, they're adjusting to life without Stefon Diggs. And I thought the Josh Allen press conference yesterday about Diggs and the receiving corps was enlightening. He was asked if he misses having Stefon Diggs around, and the response was along the lines of, well, I wouldn't say miss. And then he talked his way out of that bag because I think he realized that's not the most ideal soundbite to generate. You're going to have to deal with Diggs at some point. You don't want him to be extra motivated. Not that he's going to need much motivation when it's time to face the Buffalo Bills again. But, the bottom line is, once they changed offensive coordinators last year, when Ken Dorsey was fired after that debacle on Monday night against the Broncos, when they had too many guys for the field goal attempt that missed that would have won the game for the Bills, and Dorsey ended up being the scapegoat, and Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator, Diggs really slipped as it relates to his overall usage in the offense. And you got to ask yourself, how important is this guy to what we're doing going forward? Does it justify what we're paying him? And at the end of the day, they decided to trade him. So I don't think they'll really miss him, because when you look at what happened after they changed coordinators, he really wasn't as involved in the offense as he had been. They began the process of moving away from him. And in hindsight, you could make the argument they should have just moved on from him after that strange thing that played out in June of 2023 when he was at the mandatory minicamp and then he was gone, and the Bills created the impression he stormed out. And the truth was they told him to leave, and somehow they managed to hold it together for one more season, but they probably would have been better off without him. You can never draw a clear line to the issues and struggles a team has based upon the presence or absence of certain players. But this whole Diggs thing had dragged them down. Whether it's on Diggs, whether it's on the team, whether it's a combination, whatever it is, however they got there, it was something that needed to end. And they finally admitted it to themselves after the season. So Josh Allen has to forget about Stefon Diggs and move on. That's really all he can do. And Diggs has to forget about Allen and move on. That's all he can do. When it's time for them to play, and they may cross paths, I think they play in the regular season this year. I'm pretty sure they do. My brain, I'm going to use this vertigo thing to justify any short-term memory insufficiencies I might have. But if I recall correctly, I think the Bills and the Texans do play this year. They both won their divisions, right? So they both play this year. They play each other this year. So we'll see them cross paths. And I think we see Stefon Diggs face the Vikings fairly early in the season this year. Week 3, if I recall correctly. October 6th is when it's Bills-Texans. So, yeah. Get your popcorn from Jody Allen's Popcorn Factory ready for those games. Diggs against both of his former teams. Hoo boy. So be careful what you say about Stefon Diggs, Josh Allen, and everyone else in Buffalo, because he's going to be ready as it is. And don't give any more fuel to the fire. There's not much fire burning right now as it relates to Brandon Aiyuk and the San Francisco 49ers. I made the point last night when I wrote about this on PFT. It went from really quiet to really loud, and now it's quiet again. I stand by what I said yesterday. And again, I don't know, but I think what's going on is it's the Steelers or Aiyuk finds a way to work things out and stay here in San Francisco. Patriots out of the picture. Browns slipping out of the picture. Steelers offering Aiyuk less than the other teams were offering the 49ers less than the other teams were offering. Steelers may end up winning the day by being patient, by just letting it all kind of come to them. But at some point, here's the key. You got to get him ready. We've seen in the past how hard it is to get a receiver from one team, put him on another team, and have him make an impact right away. Some guys can do it and some guys can't. You got to learn the offense. You got to learn the playbook. You got to learn your teammates. You got to learn the quarterback. You got to learn the coaching staff. You're moving to a new city. It's a lot of change. Some guys rise up in that circumstance and some guys don't. Some teams have a better infrastructure in place to help guys get ready and make the adjustment quickly, and some guys don't. It's a lot to expect to just unplug a guy from one roster, take him all the way across the country, and plug him into another one. It might work, it might not. But whatever the Steelers or whoever ends up getting Brandon Aiyuk will be paying him, they're going to expect him to get going right away, to make an impact ASAP. And that's why I still hold out this slim possibility. Kyle Shanahan didn't rule it out the other day of a deal being done and having Brandon Aiyuk remain with the San Francisco 49ers. So we'll see. But it's gotten quiet. And, some have suggested, well, it's quiet because they're finishing out their deal, whether it's the deal with the Steelers, the deal with the 49ers, whatever. Everything's quiet now. It was loud when the parties wanted it to be loud. Now it's quiet. What does that mean? Based upon how loud it got, it can't mean that everything's just subsided and he's going to stay in San Francisco and play for $14.1 million this year. It feels like this is the proverbial calm before whatever the storm might be, whether it's news that he's staying put or whether it's news that he's going to Pittsburgh or maybe somewhere else. Maybe someone else decides to slip into this thing. The longer it's lasting, some team says, hey, maybe we'd benefit from Brandon Aiyuk, and maybe the price isn't all that prohibitive. Maybe we can entice him to come play for us. So we'll see how that all plays out. Okay, trying to keep these fairly manageable as I work through my latest health calamity. So that's it for now. But I am going to answer some questions. Here's the first one. Jacob Griffith. Maybe I'm missing something obvious, but if the NFL wanted to deter people from choosing Sunday Ticket over traditional broadcast, why partner with DirecTV and offer it in the first place? Jacob, that is an awesome question. And I can give you the answer in one word, 5 letters. Greed. Greed is good, as Gordon Gekko once said. Greed has created all sorts of innovations, and greed is the underpinning of Sunday Ticket because we're already getting a shitload of money from the traditional broadcast networks for the Sunday afternoon packages that are served up to every market where CBS and Fox do business. And back at the time they started Sunday Ticket, it was actually Fox and NBC. Remember, the same year Sunday Ticket arrived, 1994, that's when CBS lost the NFC package to Fox. NBC still had the AFC package. 4 years later, CBS took the AFC package from NBC, and NBC was without football until 2006. But it became CBS and Fox in 1998. It's been that ever since. You've got that gigantic revenue stream. Let's make the out-of-market games available too. Let's get somebody to pay for the rights to make the out-of-market package available. Now, it needs to be complimentary. It needs to be premium. It needs to be all or nothing. It needs to be something that is priced so high that most people will say, I'll just watch the games that are available on free over-the-air TV. I'm really liberal with I feel like, remember that Chris Farley character who, I'm trying to remember one of the quotes, but it's just hilarious. You'll find the video on YouTube, and he was doing the air quotes all the time, and it was something like, proper hygiene and wipe properly and whatever the case may be. Anyway, I am way down that. Again, I'll blame the vertigo for it. But so Sunday Ticket comes along, and there's a way to create a new revenue stream. And DirecTV, I think, was targeted by the NFL because this was a way for them to boost overall subscribers. They have this product out there, satellite TV. Well, you got a lot of people with cable then. Why do I want satellite TV? I get all the channels I need from the cable hookup I've had forever. Well, you entice them to get DirecTV by having the exclusive rights to the Sunday Ticket package. So all these people start getting satellite dishes. I got one, 1997. And in 94, 95, and 96, trust me, I was wishing that I was in a position where I could get Sunday Ticket. And every year I'd say, next year I'm getting it. Next year I'm getting it. By 97 I did. It changed my life. Able to watch the games I wanted to watch. Stuck in Steeler territory, able to watch Vikings games instead of watching, as I said last week, CNN headline news, waiting for the Vikings score to come across the crawl once every 10 minutes. The only network at the time that had the score at the bottom of the screen, CNN headline news. That's real. It sounds ridiculous now, but that was it. You didn't get it watching the games. You didn't get it on ESPN. You got it from the now defunct CNN headline news. I don't even know what that became. I don't even know if that channel's around. Like, some of these channels will just change names. I don't even know that that channel still exists anymore. I don't know what its name currently is, but I do remember vividly that it was CNN headline news. So bottom line, more money. More money. That's it. And the sweet spot, price it high enough so most of the people will continue to give the ratings via their local markets to CBS and Fox. So you're basically double dipping. Big pile of money from CBS and Fox, pretty good pile of money for Sunday ticket, more money for the NFL. I still believe, though, I'm not going to go back down this path today. I still believe they'd make more money and have higher viewership if all games were available on basic cable every Sunday. CBS, Fox, NBC, ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, FS1, USA, TNT. There's 9 right there. If you could watch any game, if you could watch every game, if you could flip from game to game, they could stagger the starting times. That was another idea after talking it through with someone last week I had. 12 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock, 1:30. You get games all day. You're moving around channels all day. The viewership would be tremendous and the revenue would follow. But see, I think they're concerned if they would ever start down that path, you cannot go back. Once you start giving away stuff for free, it is so hard to claw it back. Used to cost a lot of money. Now it's free. Oops, psych. Now it's going to cost a lot of money again. Good luck with that. But I still think that someone needs to have the vision and the foresight and the belief that this is a way to do it, that not only violates or avoids the violation of antitrust law, avoids the violation, but also makes more money for everyone. And that's, I think, what they're in business to do. Next one, Tom Marshall. Anything or anybody new for the upcoming Pro Football Talk season? As it relates to the website, the only difference is we're not going to have Peter King's column on Mondays. And I've been asked in the past about whether or not we're going to replace Peter King's column with something else. And, you know, the bottom line is no one else can do what Peter does like Peter did it, period. And I also believe that there's a different way of taking that massive column he had and turning it into separate posts that will, and ultimately, hey, this is a business too. You want to give people more options where they can take their traffic and they read the story here and they read the story there. And if you can take one column and turn it into 15-page views, that's better for business. And we're not going to have anyone new that's covering the things Peter covered. We're just going to continue to cover the NFL the way that we always do. And it's going to be the usual crew, the same group that we've had for a while now. MDS, Josh Alper, Shireen Williams, Miles Simmons, and yours truly, covering the NFL as it unfolds every day, every hour, every minute. Now, as it relates to PFT Live, I don't know what I'm authorized to say yet, but we've got some exciting stuff, glass half full, in store for you. But I'll defer that until I get the full and proper clearance to explain what's going to be going on this season. But PFT Live will be back starting Monday, August 12th. We'll be with you for the duration of the season and beyond until the hiatus next year. And trust me, next year's hiatus will be shorter because we won't be preempted on Peacock by the Olympics. Okay, next up, Dave. Has there ever been a joint practice without fights? Seems odd the NFL allows these practices, but then fines them if they fight. Well, this is the first time the NFL has ever fined anybody. That's the problem. The joint practices have been happening for years, and usually there aren't fights. The concern is without NFL oversight, we'll have these fights, and you got to trust the other coach that you're not going to be in a situation where the coaches aren't controlling their players and fights are happening. You know, when the Texans did Hard Knocks, 10 years ago, teams like the Saints canceled joint practices because they didn't want to get in a situation where you got guys that, get juiced up a little extra by the presence of the NFL films, cameras, and microphones, and they're more likely to start fights. Coaches ideally don't want these fights to happen because you get players injured and you teach bad habits or you tolerate bad habits, the kind of lack of discipline that will cost you 15 yards of field position and possibly games. So far more often than not, there are no fights in joint practices. This is the first time the NFL has done anything about it. And one of the keys, and look at what the Jets are doing this year, 1 day of joint practices against each team they're playing in the preseason. That second day becomes a problem because think about what happens after the first day. Guys get chewed out a little bit if they got beat by their opponent from the other team. You bring a little resentment back to the table for the second day. You want to get back at that guy that got the better of you and got you chewed out in the film room in front of your teammates. That second day can be a problem. But now for the Lions and Giants, both days were a problem. But more fights tend to happen the second day. There's more reason to fight the second day. And by the time you get to the game, You've got referees there. There's a better structure in place to keep that stuff from boiling over. When you don't have that external presence, the deterrence of penalties and fines, you're going to see guys not be able to turn the switch off. Switch turns on. Ideally, when the whistle blows, switch turns off until the next play. When you don't have that same oversight, the switch might not go off. And that's what the NFL is trying to do with the fines that were imposed on the Lions and the Giants. So for the most part, there aren't fights. When they happen, they make news. I mean, what else are we going to talk about coming out of these training camp practices? You get a fight. If you have video of it, it's compelling. It's interesting. There's a rubbernecking quality that we all have as fans, but at the end of the day, you don't want to see that because it's a way for people to get injured beyond the confines. You can tolerate injuries that happen within the structure of a practice. You get beyond the play and you have fights that get people injured. That's not good for anybody. All right, next question. Is there a next question? There's a next question. Burn Unit. Is there a sense in the league that Brandon Aiyuk is acting immature in these negotiations, or did the Niners screw it up? Look, you know my position as it relates to players getting paid. They have very few opportunities to do so, and the players who can get away with it should take a stand whenever, wherever, and however they can. Now, I thought Brandon Aiyuk was going to hold out. Squeaky wheel. You want to squeak more with the 49ers to get what you want. We saw it with Deebo Samuel. We saw it with Nick Bosa. We're seeing it with Trent Williams, although he hasn't got what he wants yet. This Brandon Aiyuk thing has worked out perfectly because, as we said yesterday, it's so contrary to the mindset of the 49ers organization. It's driving Kyle Shanahan crazy to have a guy in the building who isn't on board with everything they're doing. And it's working. It's wearing him down. It's a test of wills. And Aiyuk is winning. And it's either going to be easy for him to say, it's either going to get him a new contract with the 49ers or it's going to get him a new team. But we'll see. It's not a matter of immaturity. It's a matter of having resolve. It's a matter of treating your business as a business. And it's a matter of knowing when to take a stand in order to get more. This guy was a second-team All-Pro last year. He was second in the league in yards per target, and he had a lot more targets than the guy who was first in the league. Khalil Shakir was first in the league in yards per target. Aiyuk had just over 100 targets, over 1,300 receiving yards. CeeDee Lamb had 181 targets. If Brandon Aiyuk, based on his production last year, if he'd been targeted that many times, he would have set the single-season record. Now, I know we can't always extrapolate because who knows what would have happened if he would have been the guy that they focused on. Some are arguing, well, he benefited from the presence of Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle. He was kind of lost in the shuffle. That's how he got open. I don't think he believes that. I think he believes that there are other teams out there that would make him the clear-cut number one and pay him accordingly. The 49ers aren't ready to do it, so they don't want to pay him like the number one. They don't want to pay a guy to be number one and have him as WR2. That's why I still think that there's a slim possibility the final resolution here is all of a sudden we find out Deebo Samuel has been traded and the 49ers are keeping Brandon Aiyuk. I think the chances of that keep getting smaller and smaller the deeper we get into training camp in the preseason. But I feel like that's maybe what they should have done from the get-go. And there was talk before the draft of the Steelers trying to get Deebo Samuel, but they didn't want to give the 49ers enough. I don't think you take that off the table if you're the 49ers, because maybe you're better off in the long run if you pivot from Samuel to Aiyuk now, not after the season. I think they wanted to hold everything together for one more year and then figure out how they were going to reconfigure the roster after this season. To do that, Brandon Aiyuk had to go along with $14.1 million. Second-team All-Pro, 1,300-plus receiving yards. There's no way he should play for $14.1 million this year, and that's the main reason why he's holding in. Is that everything? No, here's another one. Colin Adams. Oh, I like this one. What do you think of the NFL license expiring with EA Sports? Do you hope they re-sign an exclusive deal? I would love to see the NFL do a non-exclusive so the quantity and hopefully quality of NFL games increases. Well, this goes back 20 years. I think I saw an X at some point this summer that was the 20-year anniversary of the release of NFL 2K5. And people loved that game. It was smooth. It was fluid. It was fun to play. And it was cheap. It was like $19.99 for that, I think. And it was $50 for Madden back at the time. And what happened was it scared the crap out of the people at EA sufficiently that they bought up the exclusive license. And I feel like there's a potential antitrust violation lurking in that as well, because you've got the league, 32 independent businesses working together, doing an exclusive deal with one entity. They can price whatever they want. There's no innovation. It's the same game every year. Look, I've been buying Madden for the last 8-9 years. I play Ultimate Team. I do it while I work out. One of the reasons I can't wait to beat this vertigo is I can get back on my bike for an hour a day and get a good sweat going and play some Madden. Would it be better? Would the game be better if there was competition? The whole underpinning of the concept of antitrust is that competition breeds innovation. Competition forces people to move toward excellence. That when you have to worry about this other software provider that has an NFL license that's making a better game, you make your game better. Oh, then they make their game better. Then they make their game better, and they get better and better. So if you have multiple licenses, the games keep getting better and it becomes more popular. But the NFL decided, once EA Sports basically said, name your price for the exclusive license, to do it with only one company at a time. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But the antitrust violation was hiding in plain sight with Sunday Ticket for more than 20 years before the lawsuits that ended up going to trial back in June were even filed. I just wonder whether or not there's a potential antitrust claim lurking around the way the NFL has handled the Madden franchise and the licensing of video games for the past 20 years. All right, a couple more questions. Next one on the docket. Molly Sadwasser, do you still think Seattle will get sold in the next few years? Well, this May was when the deadline came and went that allows Jody Allen to sell the team from her brother Paul's estate and not give 10% to the state of Washington. Before May of 2024, any sale of the team, and this comes from the stadium deal that they did, if the team had been sold, 10% of the proceeds would have gone to the state of Washington. Now it doesn't happen. And there's no deadline on when she has to sell the team. At some point, she will sell the team. At some point, she will sell off all of his assets, because Paul Allen's decision was his assets get sold and the money gets donated to the charitable causes he supports. But there isn't a trigger. There isn't a fuse. And these estates can take years to properly wrap up. And until then, Jody Allen's the owner of the Seattle Seahawks. And because there's no specific beneficiary out there saying, I want my money, pounding on the table, sell that team, I want my money, there's nothing to force her hand. And you look at how franchise values have changed just over the past couple of years. The longer you wait, the more valuable it's going to get. And I think, and I don't know, because I don't think Jeff Bezos is going to admit this to anybody, but I think he decided last year with the Commanders that why am I going to pay $6 billion for a team that's got a name that probably needs to be changed to something better, a stadium that is one of the worst in the NFL, a recent history of dysfunction that won't just immediately go away? Why do I want to do that? I can wait for the Seahawks. And I can buy a team that doesn't come with all that baggage, that doesn't require me as job number one to figure out what I'm going to do about a stadium. I just waltz right in with an existing business in a satisfactory stadium without that recent history of ugliness. And from Jody Allen's perspective, and from the perspective of those who eventually are going to get the money that comes from the sale of the team, you're going to get a lot more the longer you wait. I don't think we're going to get to a point where the values of these teams dip. They're going to keep going up, and they're going to keep going up. And the longer that Jody Allen waits, the more money is ultimately going to be harvested for the charitable causes that her late brother Paul wants to have supported based upon the wishes articulated in his last will and testament. All right, one more. Manny House Africa, will Russell Wilson get an extension before the season starts? I would be stunned if that happens. I don't think any of the quarterbacks currently under contract with the Steelers, and all three of them are under contract for 1 year this year. Kyle Allen, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. I wouldn't give any of them an extension. And if I was any of them, I wouldn't want an extension because they're going to try to buy low. I want to take my chances, and I want to sell high. I want to have a big season, and I want to go hit the market, riding the wave of being the team's starter or making more when they decide after the season to keep me as the starter. So I'd be very surprised if any of these quarterbacks get a contract extension before the season starts. And Russell Wilson, who's just back at practice this week, and we don't know if we're going to see him in the preseason. We don't know if we're going to see anything from him until it's time to play week one. Whatever they would put on the table is something that Wilson shouldn't take. Same thing with Justin Fields. So you don't get the two sides to come together if you try to do the extension now, because there's always going to be more later. If these guys have confidence, and confidence is a prerequisite to life in the NFL. You have to be confident at the point of delusional about your own skills and abilities. Why do you want to settle for whatever they would offer now to try to lock you in? And unless there's some sort of high-end incentive package that's based on being the starter, that's based on playing time and performance, etc. Justin Fields is the one who should consider that if that opportunity even arises. But I think both guys are better off letting it play out, because whatever the Steelers would offer before the season is going to be less than what they can get after the season. But the reality is, at the end of the day, just like the computer competition between George Costanza and Lloyd Braun, one guy's getting a water pick and the other guy's getting fired. Next year, only one of those guys is going to be with the Steelers, unless one of them happily returns as the backup to the other. Because through the course of the coming 17 games, we're going to get a pretty good idea of which of the two is the guy that the Steelers view as the starter moving forward. And I've said this all along. They're probably secretly hoping that it's Justin Fields because he's younger and you're going to have him longer. Look at what the Steelers had. Terry Bradshaw, all those years, quarterback situation under control. 20 years of it's this guy, it's this guy, it's this guy, it's this guy. Then Ben Roethlisberger, it's under control for all those years. I think it's one of the reasons why they drafted Kenny Pickett right after Roethlisberger retired. They were hoping to have another situation where it's years and years and years of a starting quarterback, and you worry about the rest of the roster around him. I think they want to get back to a point where they got a long-term answer, and Justin Fields, between him and Russell Wilson, the obvious choice to be the long-term answer. All right, longer-term PFT PM than I expected to do today, but that means I'm feeling a little bit better. This is part of the rehab. This is part of the recovery from the vertigo. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to try not to fall down when I get up, to unplug the various lights and shut everything down and get ready to do it again tomorrow. Thanks, as always, for some of your time. Enjoy the start of the preseason night. This fun week, because you got football Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think they do it again next week too. So we're going to get to watch a lot of games. Just remember, cross your fingers that your favorite players on your favorite team don't get injured, because that's the only bad thing that can happen to your favorite team in the preseason, coming out of it with one or more key players not available for weeks or months or the entire season. Thanks for some of your time. Check us out at ProFootballTalk.com. We'll see you again back here tomorrow. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.